It says going live. We're live. It says that we're live. So I'm going to assume that we are in fact live, and welcome everybody back to the Newt Tube. I love saying the Newt Tube, even though we started the Newt Tube, that's NOOTTOOB.TV. We started that channel, gosh, it must have been at least 10 or 15 years ago. Wow. It's been laying in wait for today. Check us out, NOOTTOOB.TV. But anyway, and I better mute this other screen here, which is talking back to me. I told you, Eddie, this would be relatively informal.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love it.
Ready to deliver. Welcome back to our tasting today. We're tasting Cabernet Franc from Glacier Ridge Vineyard, a couple of vintages, the 10 and the 13. We have our regular suspects here. Plus we have Etinosa Emokpae from Philadelphia. And Eddie, why don't you fill in our folks where you're from and what you do and how it's going?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm actually originally from New York, but I've been in Philadelphia for about 4 years. And I'm currently the wine director of Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a restaurant in Philadelphia. Yeah, obviously with coronavirus, it's been, we've been closed indefinitely. So that's been pretty tough in that regard. But the good thing about it is Philadelphia is a really great community. Especially the wine community. And so we've all been supporting each other and, having lots of Zoom conferences such as this and, kind of trying to figure out what the restaurant community is going to be, what's going to look like, when we are able to reopen. But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for making time to be with us today.
Oh my God. Thank you. This is an incredible treat.
All right. Fortunately, you have both the wines which we sent down to you a few days ago.
Yep.
So I think, shall we jump right in?
Sure, yeah.
I think, let's Cabernet Franc. We've tasted a bit of Cabernet Franc and we've made a bit of Cabernet Franc. 2010 and 2013 were pretty distinctive vintages. They were both pretty nice.
Yeah.
Shall we start with the 2013?
I'd say 13, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I love doing these tastings because we keep trying wines that I feel like I haven't tasted in 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So one of the differences between these two wines is actually, you could say that there were two different winemakers.
Well, yeah.
There would be the winemaker up here.
Yeah.
Elby was off in, were you at Fox Run in 2010?
Yeah, I was in Fox Run.
And before you went going back and forth to Australia or the Southern Hemisphere. And 2013, Gelby, that was really the first year that you took over the cellar. We worked side by side in 2012. I was in the cellar in 2013, but I really didn't do much. It was Gelby. So yeah, why don't you kick off with this 2013, Gelby?
It's actually showing more density than I was expecting off the nose. 13 was an even vintage and a good vintage, but it was notably a bumper crop vintage. And there are always, there's pluses and minuses to a bumper crop. When it's good fruit, it's great. But some of the wines from, shall we say, lesser vineyard sites kind of showed that excess fruit set, not with poor wine, but just a little bit sooner to drink, a little bit less intensity. And Glacier Ridge is just such a special site. I think on one hand, Tony's really active out there and would have been very active in dropping fruit proactively and kind of keeping things dialed in. And on the other hand, the site itself is just so naturally restrictive and so beautiful for red fruit that it just kind of shines right through.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you, the density on the nose. I actually opened both of the wines about 30 minutes before because I wasn't quite sure. I figured a little decant in the glass wouldn't, hurt. And yeah, that density on the nose was very pronounced, but I think what surprised me a lot was just the freshness of the fruit on the palate. And also that just spice, which I really love about Cab Franc, that like kind of just like pepperiness to it, which, for me, again, for 2013, for that age range, it's still nice to see that it's still very well alive and still has lots of time to go.
Boy, that's beautiful fruit. Very fruit forward this one as well. Still kind of blackberry, black raspberry kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It has a real almost like raspberry or blueberry yogurt, but not in like a lactic sense, but just like there's that like crispness or freshness that Eddie mentioned. It's really kind of, especially because the nose is a little bit, it's not evolved, but like the nose leans a little bit more into kind of the smoke and spice, and the fruits there, but like the freshness on the mid palate is really kind of a fun surprise.
And then in terms of wine making for this, I would assume, would you de-stemming or?
This would have been probably 25% whole cluster or so.
Okay.
So not a huge amount of whole cluster, but Glacier Ridge, the stems are pretty ripe, and we like getting some of them in. And then actually, I'm guessing the winemaking between this and the 10 are pretty similar. Actually, the standard at Red Newt is always the 10 picked and gets brought in 1 ton bins for fermentation. We have would have been the same punch down tool for both of them, old wooden punch down tool. Someone does by hand a few times a day, usually, more during peak ferment and less after that. And we would have spiked the temperature on this, would have let it get up to mid 80s, maybe 90 during the start part of ferment when it's really raging. And then just pressed off at the end and right into barrels from there, or maybe a day in a container in between, just to make sure what goes into barrels is uniform. But
yeah, that's pretty much what happened in 2010. But I think
Go ahead, Dave.
May have been a little bit warmer early ferment temperatures on the 2010, but I'm thinking that most of what we're seeing here in the glass is the difference that we're seeing in the glass is more a result of the sort of distinction between the vintages than the winemaking.
And Kelby, which barrels were we using in 13? Were we still using the American barrels in 13?
So this was probably like these would have been new barrels at this point, but they would have been maybe like third youth, most of them. And this would have we made a viridescence, so we made our Bordeaux blend in 13 to my recollection. But any of these that what identifies this wine is that it's a single vineyard site, but within that there's certainly barrel selection the following spring and summer to pick the best barrels, because sometimes there's ones that really shine and work together and ones that just don't want to play nice.
I'm moving along to the 2010 here, which is really there's an elegant contrast to the 2013. Just a little bit more now, a little bit more sort of smokiness and woody, more smokiness in the nose. I think the wood is really nicely integrated. The 2010, even more than the 2013, I recall at the outset, it had a little bit bigger footprint of oak. Heather mentioned the oak barrels. We used almost exclusively for quite a few years wood from a cooperage. Canton Cooperage is the Kentucky cooperage. But they had been around for a while. Probably I used some of the barrels from them first in probably maybe about 93 or so. And they were kind of a spin-off from a company in California what was the name of was the barrel built? I'm not going to say, but there was a cooperage in California. They kind of spun off, and they were some of the first people in the nation to really take wine barrel cooperage in building seriously, with kind of a French tradition. And we're making some really great cooperage. American oak is inherently different than the French oak in terms of its composition. So with these barrels, we usually went for a kind of not sort of counterintuitively, a really quite heavy toast, even not quite a char, but really, really dark toast, which was made a nice, impacted that sort of bright vanilla-y type of oak to get with American oak, really reined that in. And with this vineyard in particular over the years, I've really liked that sort of smoky, rich character they get from those particular barrels, which goes nicely with this really intense fruit from the smokiness from Glacier Ridge.
Yeah, like I really like, again, when I first opened it, put in the glass, again, that vanilla was kind of more pronounced, but I really love how that kind of just blew off, and you kind of have, again, you have that, those pyrazines coming through, but they're a little bit more subtle. Like it really, I mean, obviously different styles, different places, but it definitely reminds me of, of Ogorafo, which is one of my favorites. But I think of Le Picasse, and it has, for me, a lot of a similar nose to me, and all those things that I love about kind of aged Cab Franc. It's a really beautiful wine.
I think you can tell that this was a year that there was a little bit less fruit on the vine, because there's
Definitely
a little more concentration showing in this one. And I think I'm seeing a little bit of probably a little bit younger barrel oak influence, because the tannins on this are a little bit more like prevalent and notable still, which I think is really pretty, and really gives this wine quite a bit of structure for being 10 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, Kelby, what the 2013 vintage. I do remember the 2010 well, because it was so unusual. Lots of moisture during the summer, and lots of sunshine. So we had big canopies and a lot of photosynthesis and really ripe grapes. What was the 2013 like in terms of harvest weather and summertime weather?
It was pretty similar, actually. It was cooler. I think that's probably the biggest difference. I mean, it was probably average temperature in 13 compared to the heat of 10, but it was actually relatively similar in terms of, I mean, if you were a corn farmer in 2013, you were ecstatic because you were getting like that inch of rain every week that you're looking for, just like, and not because it was raining every day. It was just like very regular, very even. I think that's one of the reasons the 13 vintage was so big, because it was almost like perfect weather for growing fruit or growing anything. Just a little bit cooler than the 10s. Megs and I are on a Cab Franc tear here. Megs joined me. I did a fun Zoom class last night with Maxwell Park down in DC.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, they had our 16 cream label, so our kind of classic Cabernet Franc, not the single vineyard. They had it, and it brought up their whole theme was grapes that can have green notes to it. It brought up this interesting conversation because our Cab Francs have, I would say, do have kind of certainly a savoriness and an herbaceousness, but Finger Lakes Cab Francs, by and large these days, don't have that like screaming bell pepper. I think.
No, I definitely agree with that. Like I actually have on the list now, I have the 17 of the Red Newt, the entry level Cab Franc, and why I put it on was because I have a Bourgogne on as well from the same vintage, but I just wanted something that did have a little bit more fruit, but again, not a fruit bomb or anything that's bombastic. I think that the best thing for me about Finger Lake Cabernet Francs is it does strike that balance between kind of like fruit and savoriness, and it's kind of really hard to find anywhere else, at least within the United States, for me. But yeah, but that's actually a pretty cool, that seems like that was a pretty cool Zoom What were the other wines that you had besides, was it just it was all different grapes that had green notes, or wines of green
Well,
notes?
yeah, that was they
Okay.
did a Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay, cool.
Yep, and they did a Muscat, kind of leaning into like the floral side of things.
Yeah.
And then they did a Syrah to talk about Brett and kind of earthiness as well.
Mhm.
But
Very cool.
yeah, it was a good class. They were a rambunctious group of people.
Yeah, wine people usually are. So. Wow, yeah.
They're really definitely like as different as these vintages were, there's definitely like I would call it like a tension in the mid palate. I'm trying to think how to describe it in non-abstract terms, because initially I was going to say like a minerality, but like there is like kind of separate of like the fruit and the oak. There's a really pleasant like rubbing together of the tannins and the acid that in both these wines implies that they still have time to age, and there's a real like tightly wound core to them that feels very true to any of the Glacier Ridge wines. I don't think Glacier Ridge ever gives us a wine that's just kind of like open and showy right out of the gate.
I think that my favorite part about Glacier Ridge Cab Francs is I can literally put them in my cellar a couple stories beneath where I have my everyday wines and forget about them for 7 or 8 years and not even have a care in the world, and know that even if it's a 2007, it still has a little bit left to it. And being able to age these is a really great exercise and really showing where Cab Franc can go from the Finger Lakes. I'm really happy that we've been able to bring out some of these aged wines and showcase where they're at, because they still have a ways to go. And it's kind of wonderful to see that we've hit that stride, especially with a variety like Cab Franc and the Finger Lakes.
How much of these wines do we have left, Heather?
Actually, I was I was in this morning grabbing wines, but I did not look at these two. Dave, do you have some numbers?
I will in a second.
Okay. He's got the supercomputer with multiple screens too. So.
Yeah.
I have to give a shout out to Dave and Kelby on this one. Just as I found that it's certainly changed over the years, but for the longest time, like there were a lot of Cabernet Francs and just Finger Lakes Reds in general that are made, and they were really great out the gate, but then they would kind of fall flat with time. Like they just did not have the tannic structure to really stand up. And these two wines really do show that, like, you guys were well ahead of the curve on figuring out like how to handle tannins and how to incorporate them in wines to like give them that longevity and that structure.
Okay.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, Tony Damiani has actually joined us, and he's looking at the alcohol content on the wines, and he goes, 14.5% alcohol on the 2010. Is that a little high for the Finger Lakes? No.
Not for 2010.
Yeah.
2010 was a really ripe year. Boy,
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say, given the weather conditions, it wouldn't be too surprising to see a 14.5% red.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at some of our previous YouTube episodes, like the Gewürztraminers from the 10s and whatnot were also
That's right.
up there nice and ripe.
Yeah.
I think the more notable alcohol is actually the 2013 vintage being 13.7. Like that was a hard vintage to get anything. Not that we're chasing bricks or alcohol, but like I was actually taken aback looking at the bottle. I was like, wow, like that it managed to get to that point in 2013. That takes some doing.
But I mean, the thing for me that's really great about it, because I feel like I'm always really sensitive to alcohol. It's just like it's still really lush. Like you don't really feel the heat of it at all. And I think for me, that's a really great thing. They're both incredibly balanced. And I just always go back to like, being on the floor of a restaurant and, how you sell these wines. And, Cab Franc has always been, for me, it's always been in my arsenal of things to sell, but it's always kind of like, like the equivalent of like the other white meat, because people are just like very, they're sold on like, well, do you have a Cabernet Sauvignon? And like, I was like, yeah, we do. But it's like, if people are thinking about like what they're eating, it's like, I always go to Cab Franc because I always think it has the versatility and the elegance and all of that. Whereas, sometimes depending on how a Cabernet Sauvignon is made, you know, it might not have that. And so these wines are, I mean, like it runs the gamut of like how many things you can pair with it, you know, and just, I don't know, just really incredible wines. I have to say again.
Yeah.
Cheers to you guys.
Well, I just checked, and it turns out this 2010 Cabernet Franc that we're all enjoying right now will probably be the last time we enjoy it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's gone.
That's sad.
I'm really glad. I'm sad, but I'm not happy
Well,
that
now I wish
It's
that
a
I had
happy
poured
sad,
in
right?
this bottle instead of popping the cork. Jeez.
Good. And the 2013, there's like 20 cases there, 10, 20 cases left. Yeah. So yeah. So now that I know that it's the last one, I'm definitely going to be having it with dinner. It's got me thinking about food.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we usually wrap this up with a little bit of food talk, just to kind of help us ease into the rest of the evening. So let me see, Megs, what do you have planned for dinner tonight to finish off the leftovers?
Oh boy, actually quite the undertaking. I am not cooking this. Ryan is making a bacon wrapped chèvre and blueberry stuffed pork tenderloin.
Ooh, that sounds familiar.
Production, and then I'm just gonna do the side dish with some Brussels sprouts, probably with like bacon and cranberry, and maybe some like mashed potatoes or something.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's nice. How about you, Matt or Heather?
Well, today my mom and I actually did a wine flower class with Hillary Iver Johnson using Chardonnay and Gewürztraminer flowers to create Gewürztraminer deviled eggs with all local ingredients. We then made asparagus fries with Chardonnay wine flower and panko and Parmesan. And then we finished it off with 3 local mushrooms, shiitakes, baby bellas, and oyster mushrooms, reduced in a butter and Madeira sauce over Cabernet Franc bread with fresh chèvre. So I'm going to be eating more of those leftovers with this with the 10 and maybe a little bit of the 13 Cab Franc.
That is fantastic.
Pretty much when I was eating, as we were making this on this video, and if you haven't had a chance to try wine flower, you should. It's a great way to enhance flavors in food. It's produced locally in the Finger Lakes. They do Chardonnay, Riesling, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Gewürztraminer flowers.
Very cool.
And Hillary has been huge on PBS and on other venues trying to get kind of information out there about what it does. It was a lot of fun. It was my mother's Mother's Day present. We had enough to have dinner, and it runs the gamut of all things I love about Cab Franc. So,
and I affectionately call people like Hillary Nivers Johnson ex-neuters.
She is an ex-neuter.
A group of 1,000 or so people that have worked at Red Newt over the past 20 years, and she was a rock star when she worked there when she was starting at 14 years old for a few years. So, How about you, Rebecca?
I'm having lamb burgers tonight. So we have some brioche buns, and we have some lamb from JD Steele in Avon, some ground lamb, and some tzatziki. And I'm going to make a tabbouleh salad, and yeah, it should be yummy with this.
Yeah.
Sounds delicious. I want to go to everybody else's house.
Yeah, that sounds great.
What do you got going, Kelby?
We're going old school as we continue our efforts of cleaning out the freezer of various things we've picked up. And we've meant to make this recipe for a while. We had a pork liver from Boston Farms. So we're doing an Alsatian recipe for quenelles. So really French classic cuisine, chopped up and pork liver dumplings, I guess, or like poached pork liver dumplings with butter on top. So, I mean, I guess you have to like liver, which I do. So that sounds great to me. But if you don't, that probably sounds absolutely horrifying.
How about you, Eddie? What do you have on your?
Well, I mean, I don't have anything as fabulous as you guys. I have actually leftover barbecue ribs that I think are gonna go really well with both of these wines. That I think that I'm gonna enjoy. I also have some cheese too. That's in the fridge. I don't know. I think I've just some chèvre and some other things that I think would definitely with this 2010. I know, or the 2013 would be great too, but the 2010 for sure. But yeah. Either way, I'm going to savor it since it's the last.
All right. Yeah, well, I don't really know what I'm having for dinner, but I did go to the Ithaca Farmers Market this morning and bought a bag of absolutely beautiful king oyster mushrooms. So, and a beautiful bunch of mustard greens. So in my future are those two ingredients, certainly some butter, and I think some little carrots and some little glazing going on. And in terms of sort of thinking of center of the plate, maybe those will be, or maybe there'll be something else to go with it. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Eddie. It's been real.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you, everybody out there. Hopefully we'll see you again next time, and have a great evening from us to you. Cheers.
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 Mm.